executive, a globe-trotting adventurer, an internationally competitive springboard and platform diver and diving coach, competing all over the world for the U.S. And then one day, Jim, can you hit the next slide?
Oh, yes. No, I'm already gonna get fired.
One day all that changed. I was training on a trampoline. Divers train flipping on trampolines. And I made a mistake in midair, landed on my head instead of on my feet, and everything changed in an instant. I found myself in ICU for 2.5 months, hooked up to a ventilator, unable to move any part of my body, unable to eat, unable to speak, and it was pretty devastating. I spent about 1.5 years out of commission in various hospitals, both here and around the world. And after 1 year of rehab, Jim, can you hit the next slide?
Aha.
I'm pretty much back to being a globe-trotting adventurer, back to executive producing, back to coaching springboard and platform diving. I coach Greg Louganis, and pretty much very little has changed. It takes a whole lot of perseverance, a whole lot of dedication, and a little bit of imagination to be able to get back to doing things I did before, just doing them differently. But very little has changed in me. And Jim, can you hit the next slide? One of the things we're hoping to get back to is get me back underwater. When I met Jim about 2 years ago here at the Aquarium, my first question obviously was, well, have you ever taken anyone down on a ventilator before? I had been a dive master since I was 16 years old. I had been scuba diving since I was 14, and with 200 plus dives under my belt, it was time to get back underwater. And when you're testing out a prototype like this and doing the impossible, you can't just take anyone down underwater to try it out. You need to find the right guinea pig. So when Jim and I met, it was like, Jim, you found your guinea pig. So we started talking from there, partnered up with, can we go to the next slide? Let's see, I can't quite see that one. Let me talk about a spinal cord injury to begin with. Spinal cord injury, my injury is at C3 and C4, which means it's very high up in my neck, which means I'm paralyzed from the neck down. I can't move anything or feel anything from the neck down. I do have some limited head movement. I can move my head up and down and turn my head left to right, but I pretty much rely on my voice and other people's hands to accomplish just about everything. I can run my entire computer using voice control. This entire presentation was built with voice control. But very limited mobility, very limited sense of feeling. It's not fun. It's challenging, and it's a lot of work. But you find ways around the problems. You find ways to make things possible, and that's one of the things that we're doing with this project. Next slide. Jim, you want to take this slide?
Yes, respiratory system.
Yeah.
And the inability to breathe using your chest muscles. Do you want to articulate on that? Or?
Yeah, so you'll notice the tube attached to my throat ear. That's hooked up to a ventilator on the back of my chair, and that is what's allowing me to breathe. Because of the level of my injury, the nerve that controls my diaphragm and my breathing was damaged. It wasn't severed, it was damaged. So there is hope that someday it may recover, but for the most part, right now I'm totally dependent on a machine and a battery to breathe. It's keeping me alive, which presents some challenges when you go to take that equipment underwater. Through trial and error, I've been on just about every ventilator that there is, and landed on the Vivo 50. It's a remarkable ventilator that both delivers air as I need it and as I demand it. So it's a balance of me triggering breaths and and the ventilator delivering breaths that it knows it should deliver. So there's always air available when I need it. It allows me to talk very fluidly, and it allows me to breathe basically effortlessly. It's also very quiet. A lot of ventilators sound like rocket engines strapped to the back of a wheelchair, and this ventilator is almost silent. So the ventilator is doing all the work of breathing and taking me underwater, or any ventilator-dependent individual. That ventilator is going to need to continue to do the work of breathing underwater, which means it has to be hooked up to scuba tanks to provide an air source, and then that needs to, the output of that ventilator then needs to be regulated so that when the air reaches me, that it's at an appropriate pressure. So there's a lot of body science, a lot of pressure science, and some physics involved in making this work. For a long time, this was thought to be a pipe dream. It's like you want to take a ventilator where and do what with it, and it runs off electricity. Well, yes, and yes, but nothing's impossible with a little imagination. Let's head to the next slide. So, Jim, can you talk a little bit more about Matt Johnston and the first ventilator dive, the tethered one?
Yeah, Matt lobbied us and everyone in the dive industry for a long time to work with us. And we pulled together the first team to get him training. And he's down there now in Key Largo on the left side. You're seeing him with the team that took him out on his very first open water dive. And what they did is they had to take his ventilator and put it on a little raft, and he floated along with the team as he was underwater. And of course, getting him on and off the boat is challenging as well. The 2 times I've dove with him, his ventilator has failed. So we've had to get him out of the water and throw him on another ventilator, or get an ambu bag on him right away. And that's one of the things that we're very concerned with when we do this. We want to make sure that we have redundancy, which is why we went 2 ventilators and have the proper medical personnel there, and all the procedures worked out on how to do emergency exits and things like that. And then what we do is we pray really hard that nothing ever happens bad. But if we can switch from one ventilator to the other underwater, then we can ascend, because then we're on one ventilator and we can safely take it to the surface, transfer maybe to a land ventilator. And those are the details we're working out right now with our teams. But we do the most involved diving in the world with any people with disabilities. We really pioneered using the full face mask. On the right-hand side is Amber. Amber's a lot like Lenny. She was a world-class barefoot water ski champion. And what she did is she caught a jump wrong, and she landed on her head and ended up with a cervical injury, similar but not as severe as Lenny's. And so she's an incomplete quadriplegic. She has some movement in her arms. And what we do is we get her, I'm there getting her neutrally buoyant, and once we get her neutrally buoyant in a current, she's able then, using her breath, when she breathes in, she comes up, when she exhales, she goes down. And we call that kind of the sweet spot, that we want people to all experience their astronaut moment, right? So that they can hover motionless. You know, people say skydiving is like scuba diving. It's not. It's like when you run out of air skydiving, there's a problem. When you run out of air scuba diving, you just go to the surface, right? And we have procedures for that.
And for those of us on ventilators, we've got about 1 minute and 30 seconds or so before we're dead. So we kind of need to figure that out.
So this is going to be daunting, but that's kind of what we're doing in these slides.
So we're working with an amazing team of people throughout the healthcare industry, throughout the diving industry, and the academic world. We've partnered with Northwestern University and their engineering department to engineer how in the world do we get all this stuff underwater and work with it efficiently. We've partnered with West Prime Medical to provide the ventilator equipment. We've partnered with Diveheart to custom manufacture a dry suit to keep me from filling up with water. It's an amazing team of people that have committed themselves to making the impossible possible. Like I said, this is the stuff of fantasy, or was the stuff of fantasy years ago. And step by step, we've been opening up the underwater world to those of us on ventilators. First with a tether, and now we're taking all the equipment underwater. Let's go to the next slide. Jim, you want to take this one?
Sure. Our goal is to safely allow Lenny, with assistance and specialized equipment, to dive again. If successful, this will be the first to do this using scuba equipment untethered to equipment above water. To achieve this, there are challenges that include the development of specialized equipment, establishment of limitations and protocols. We talked about outer emergencies and things like that. Sequential testing of the equipment and protocols, and that's where the Northwestern, and you've been working with the engineering students more than I have. I mean, you know, I know there's all sorts of things to consider. What are some of the things they want to consider in testing the equipment? So,
Well, you need redundancy. Something happens underwater, and if you're diving and able to control things yourself, something happens underwater and you can logically and calmly think through the issue, solve it, and get to the surface. With me, something happens underwater, and we need to be able to deal with it because I can't. So, communication is going to be important. We'll be using full face masks with audio transmission, so I can talk to the team and let them know if there's an issue with the ventilator or an issue with the way that I'm breathing or the way that I'm positioned. Redundancy in every system. We can't just take one ventilator down there and hope for the best. We've got to take two to make sure that at 60 or 90 feet underwater or wherever we end up, we need to be able to switch to another working ventilator if something goes wrong. Procedures for ascending and descending. For me, because I can't grab my nose and blow to equalize the pressure in my ears, our descents need to be slower so that I can equalize on the way down. On the way up, I can't control my own buoyancy, so the teams are going to have to work out protocols for controlling my buoyancy so I don't have an uncontrolled ascent. The equipment, the dry suit, I need to stay dry for a number of reasons. One, there's a hole in my throat, and if water gets in that hole in my throat, I drown. So we need to be able to seal water out of my throat so that water can't get down there. Also, with spinal cord injuries, we don't control our temperature very well, so we can go hypothermic very, very quickly. So we need to keep me dry and warm. So with a dry suit, I'll be able to basically be diving in thermals underwater without getting wet. So there's a whole myriad of things that need to be considered and able to get me back into the water. Even something as simple as how do we get me from wheelchair to boat, boat to water, water back to boat, boat back to wheelchair. All of those protocols need to be figured out because I can't move and I can't help myself move to help the team that's supporting me. So there's a lot of stuff that has to be figured out, but it's a project that is incredibly valuable, and it's a project that's worth figuring out, and it's a viable project. So the goal is to have something to prototype by the beginning of summer, something that we can take into a swimming pool and say, okay, look, this works. We can breathe underwater here. The ventilators are safe. There's redundancy involved. So first test will be in a pool. Second test, we'd like to take this to one of the larger aquariums. The Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta is a likely candidate to show this off, prove that it works, show to the world that there are no limitations when it comes to being disabled. If we can take a ventilator underwater, you can do pretty much anything. So an aquarium dive in a controlled environment would be next. And then it's off to Cozumel, and we'll try this in the open ocean, and we'll make sure it works. But once we can get this to work, it opens up scuba diving to the ventilator-dependent population around the world, which is, there's nothing like it. If you haven't had an opportunity to dive before, take an opportunity to try it. There's no other feeling like it. There's a great freedom underwater. There's a peace. There's a solitude, and it's an otherworldly feeling. You're exploring. You're having an opportunity to place yourself in an environment where less than 1% of the world's population has ever or will ever go. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. Jim?
Well said. And you know, I'd like to reinforce the fact that this is not about scuba diving. This is about helping people, not just with disabilities, but people of all abilities, imagine the possibilities in their life. And we happen to be using zero gravity and scuba therapy as the tools to help them achieve that. And we believe that there's a huge unrealized potential in people with disabilities, and we can create that paradigm shift. Now it's not Johnny in a wheelchair anymore, it's Johnny the scuba diver, and then point Johnny towards coral reef restoration and oceanography and marine biology. We can make them good stewards of the environment, and I think we need good stewards of the environment right now, especially underwater, where so few people explore, and so few people see the devastation to our reefs and our environment. And when it's all, 80% of the world is water, so I mean, we're pretty dependent on these ecosystems. If we screw them up, all of a sudden there's going to be a whole lot to pay. So anyway, let's go on to the next one. This is some of the equipment, Lenny. You want to?
It's a combination of your standard scuba equipment and customized equipment. Like I said, there's a ventilator involved in here, and there'll be 2 ventilators involved in here for redundancy. Those ventilators have to be locked inside of waterproof cases. They run off electricity. Fortunately, the Vigo ventilator has a battery life of up to 12 hours. We need to figure out what that battery life is underwater. We know what it is at the surface, but everything we've got to be able to be redundant, including the team. Anyone that's underwater supporting a dive for someone on a ventilator needs to have a duplicate, a doppelganger, to replace them in the event something goes wrong with their own equipment. Somebody needs to monitor the ventilator. Somebody needs to control my limbs. Somebody needs to control the ventilators themselves. There's a whole lot of equipment and a whole lot of people going down on any one of these dives. And everybody needs to be able to operate my equipment for me because I can't do it myself. So again, we'll be relying very heavily on verbal communication with the full face masks.
Yeah, this is the full face mask here. We started pioneering using the full face mask originally for blind divers, thinking what we would do is we'd use this communication device on the ear and talk to them underwater, placing their hands on things that are safe to touch, and basically narrate to them underwater, giving them a more fulfilling experience. Because my daughter's blind, and I thought, what a waste of time diving is going to be for blind people. You can't see anything, and you need to see things to control your buoyancy, I thought. But it really has been amazing for people who are visually impaired and blind. And when I did the blind training, that's when I kind of thought, let's start using these. And this is the kind of mask that Lenny will be wearing. This is the regulator where he, typically, if you were breathing in and out on your own, this would provide the air. And then we'll put this in a position where it's always on, so we can hear Lenny breathe, we can hear him communicate at any time, and then we'll push a button and he'll be able to hear us respond back to him. This is the dry suit we're talking about. The neck seal and the wrist seals are the only place that water potentially could get in, and it's called a dry suit because theoretically it's supposed to be dry if it fits properly. And this way the trach hose will come into a special port that DUI is developing, and so it'll come in from the ventilator to the special port in the hose somewhere here on the torso, and then it'll come up to Lenny's trach. And the seal will be above that, so it'll keep the water out. And the face will be protected, so we'll be protecting his airway in the face and through the trach. And then he'll wear the dry suit, and we'll operate the dry suit here and here where there's a dump, and here where there's a hose typically that allows you to add air if we use that for buoyancy, which we may not. We may add a little bit of air as we get deeper, only because it tends to squeeze as you go down as pressure increases, so we want Lenny to be comfortable. So those are all things that we need to be experimenting with. And this is the regulator set here, typically the gauges and the 2 second stages and the first stage, which breaks down the high pressure from the tank. And then some of the technical equipment that Diveheart has been kind enough to make available. We don't, we don't know how we're gonna strap it to him yet, or to the equipment, but it's gonna be pretty awesome and groundbreaking, the way we, work with the Western engineering students and Lenny devised it.
That's what testing's for.
A lot of testing.
Lots of time in a swimming pool.
Super. Anything else you wanna add? Is that the last slide? Yeah, I think so.
I think so. Any questions?
I'm gonna take a picture of this one, so go ahead. Any questions about this?
Pretty remarkable undertaking, and it's been really impressive. The amount of support that we've had from throughout the diving community, throughout the media community, the DME community, the dive manufacturing community. It's been a real rally of support, saying it's time to make this happen. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to take someone on a ventilator underwater. The time is now, and
Yeah.
the team is here.
How do you eat? How do you eat it? Like this, or
How deep?
above water or underwater? Okay.
Wait, what's the question again?
How do you eat?
How do I eat? Just like you, but somebody's got to use the fork for me because I can't with my hand. But yeah, I can pretty much do anything that anyone can do. I just have to figure out ways to do it differently. All I'm relying on this hose for is breathing. I drive the chair myself using the straw that's over my right shoulder. By blowing and sucking on the straw, I can move forward, backwards, turn. I can, using ramps and lifts, we can get me into just about any building on a boat. We can put me anywhere. It's one of the remarkable things about being here in the United States is that accessibility is really not as much of an issue as it used to be. Things are, you can find ways to get into buildings, you can find ways to do things.
It's all about adapting, we like to
Yeah.
say. And we don't call our divers handicapped divers or disabled divers, we call them adaptive divers, because it's taking whatever abilities they have. In fact, when I walk up to somebody, I don't even see their disability.
Come on in.
I say, what kind of abilities do you have? And they, once we identify that, we use whatever they have. If it's sight, and they have a cone of vision here, we use that to demonstrate skills or show them the equipment. If it's movement of the arms or legs, if they have any, and it's just range of motion and how we can best use that to help them achieve what they want to achieve underwater and stuff, so. Yeah, Chris?
Lenny, did you talk to Matt Johnson? Have you guys shared experience, like him telling you how his experience was, and what are you most excited as far as?
Yeah, Matt and I have talked a couple of times over the last several months, and he's excited to see this go one step further, and see how deep we can go and what we can do by untethering the ventilator from the surface.
And was his experience positive when he did it with the ventilator on the surface?
He had a great experience. Matt had never been diving before, right, Jim?
No.
Yeah, so it was a totally new experience for him, and he really enjoyed it. Do you remember how many times he's been down since?
It's
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. He's given up diving. He has MS. So at the time, he could move his thumbs, and it's progressed to the point where he's just got rid of, he outgrew his dry suit, so he sold that and just kind of got out of the whole thing, kind of. But he dove several times. He dove in the ocean,
Yeah,
dove in a lake, and he did many cool experiences. So
but his attitude right now is very much carry the torch,
yeah.
move it forward, see where you can go.
Yeah, if you go to the Florida Keys in Key Largo, they have or just south of Key Largo, they have a history of diving museum. And they have kind of a display area where it has a full life-size version of Matt in his dry suit hooked up to the ventilator. And then Today's Show has about a 12-minute piece they did on him. And so that video plays all the time and stuff. And we have that too if you're interested in seeing that. That's on our YouTube channel as well. So.
And like Jim and I said earlier, it's not easy getting somebody who's unable to help move into the water, onto a boat, out of the water. It's a challenge, but it's something that all of us believe very strongly in, and we push ourselves through that challenge and we make it work.
Awesome. Any other questions at all? Well, I'd like to take some photos. It's all about the photo op for me, right? So, I'd like to get our ventilator team up here, if we can do that. And, we'll get that with Lenny, and you can be in there too. And then I'd like to, after that, I'd like to get, can you guys take a picture? And then I'd like